Hello, I'm Thirumoy Banerjee in conversation with Madhav Pai, the CEO of WRI India. Thank you, sir, for speaking to PTI. WRI has signed a series of MoUs with various organizations in the C&I sector. Which specific players are you looking to bring under the umbrella?
No, we are going to today announce this CI and a synergy platform, which is really commercial and industrial sector. And the attempt there is actually there has been very little electrification in low to medium heat sort of applications, and usually these customers are actually willing to move to renewable energy or are moved. Today they are using thermal energy or some coal burning. They are willing to move, and so there are two things. Is one is can they buy from utilities, because they don't have the size maybe to do captive on their own. So can utility create a separate tariff maybe for green, which might not be substantially lower, it might be slightly lower than the other tariff that they offer. And so the idea of this is to reach out to clusters, industrial clusters. So industrial clusters in Telangana, some in Maharashtra have expressed interest to sort of join this alliance and see how they can move sort of low to medium heat applications to clean energy, to electrification. So I think that's the alliance, and we are looking at a broad base of companies that can move together. So, so it's one is to aggregate demand. So a certain type of industrial process needs a certain type of heat and certain type of electricity. So one is to see if we can aggregate certain types of demand. The other is to see on the utility side with tariffs and other rules, if you can make changes to be able to encourage this or incentivize this.
In the coming days, how do you see cities transforming the clean energy transition?
So cities are biggest consumer of clean energy, right? So I think one of the things cities can do is signal demand for clean energy, right? If the consumers ask, then that is one sign. I think electrification of transport is rapidly moving. We'll see a big surge of that demand that comes, and ideally our hope is that that comes from renewable energy also. We will also buildings. I mean, about the biggest consumer or producer of greenhouse gases in cities is buildings and commercial buildings. So there is a huge opportunity also for them to move to these sort of zero carbon buildings. And if we, I think there is now a lot of good examples where if you almost beyond a certain size of buildings, in fact the capex also is lower. If you go to clean energy, you need a smaller transformer, you're using some rooftop, you're doing building efficiency. So suddenly you're reducing your energy requirement by 30%, 20%, you're meeting 25%, you're meeting with renewable energy. Then if you do some amount of transform, you do some storage, you're really able to generate very different. So I think the imagination of buildings and how they consume energy can change. Will be able, that's another big space. So buildings, transport, these are the big sort of energy consumers in cities, and if we are able to transform them, and we are on the way, I think really the business models, the financing around this has to be figured out, and I think then we will really be able to transform cities to clean energy.
Sir, what are some of the ways we can ensure that India's green transition benefits all, especially the marginalized communities?
See, I mean, I think one of the things I always say, I was shocked, for example, I was in rural Maharashtra and more people were using e-rickshaws than the big cities, right? You would have never imagined it. But it's simple, they have to go very far to get diesel today because of, some of these government schemes. There is solar energy in their village, they're able to charge their vehicles, and so they're and instead of driving 30 kilometers to get to the nearest, fuel station. So that renewable energy also, I think we are starting to see. Now what happens is, if they are buying these things in these villages, they need to be able to, they will break down, right? So then how do we create businesses, right? That can then provide this kind of maintenance, O&M services. So really I think a big part is also how do we operationalize some of these businesses, small businesses. So you are also bringing the green skilling, the jobs angle, but also then actually supporting this transition to these technologies. Actually make sense because of the last mile challenges, especially in sort of rural environments. The other thing I also of course feel is that I think if we can create again small businesses that are able to do like agro processing, cold stores, those kind of units also, we see that about 20% of greenhouse gases coming from food loss and waste. And food loss is the amount of food you lose before it reaches the mandi. So, there is tremendous loss between farm and the retail mandi in the city. That how do you reduce those losses? Needs better packaging, needs storage, needs processing, needs good transport, and these are all parts of green transition, right? So, how do we then catalyze these small businesses becomes really, I think if we are able to catalyze these small businesses, get them the necessary finance and markets, then we will really be able to create a green transition which is just beyond products. It is more about creating the sort of marketplace for green transition.
What about MSMEs, sir? How do you see this benefiting MSMEs? Because they employ a lot of people from the grassroots.
Yeah, I mean, MSMEs again, I think one, they have to, from a competitiveness perspective, they have to do it. I mean, I think as more and more regulations will come on need for, green cement, green steel, green all of that, you have to be of this well. So from a pure competitiveness, they have to do it. So again, I think if that's where I think for MSMEs to come together and do aggregated buying, they may not be individually able to buy, say, do their own installations. Can they do some group buying? Can they think about energy efficiency? So this low to medium heat application, this synergy platform that we talked about, is a great example of sort of supporting the mid green transition in a way that they are able to make it becomes win-win. So I think preparing for resilience, because climate events, floods, heat are becoming a big thing, transitioning to clean energy and green skilling. These are the absolute three things that MSMEs need to be able to part of this green transition. And we are going to talk about all three things at the conference, right? So we are talking about green skilling, we are talking about this kind of distributed renewable energy and opportunities with it, and of course also on grid resilience and other issues of sort of heat and other challenges that cities face, that MSMEs face.
Why should developing countries like India invest in climate financing at a time when developed economies like the US have pulled out of agreements?
I think we will need, I mean, there is, see, today 83% of the movement to green energy is funded by domestic finance. Only so far 17% international finance has come. But there is a plenty of international finance available. So I think we have to figure how we can unlock, right? And a lot of that is really figuring out the business models. So I agree that there is more capital or commitment, especially for a lot of other global south countries that the developing countries have to put on the table, and we need, otherwise there is no way possible to make this transition, especially when technologies like storage or green hydrogen, etc., are just emerging, and we need money to be able to sort of subsidize that sort of technology development. But at the same time, I think there is a clear win-win for especially India, given its scale and size, that there are certain things that we should really just figure out how we can finance, and we have already done that with renewable energy, we are doing that with electric vehicles. I think there are other things also where we should really push and drive that, because I think in the end, if you are getting triple bottom line benefits, you should do it. But there are things like going to green steel, going to green cement, decarbonization of aviation, maritime, these hard to abate sectors. This will require international finance to come through. And if India has to meet its goals, it needs the finance. So if this finance is not available, I don't think we will be able to meet our goals, or nobody in the world will. So I think this unlocking of international finance to meet especially the hard to abate sector goals is absolutely essential. And I think now the US stepping out, etc., can be a temporary setback, but eventually it has to be, otherwise we will not be on course to meet our as a one earth to meet our commitments.
There have been suggestions that the coming days may see the end of the NGO era with the funding crunch all across. So at a time like this, what kind of challenges has WRI faced and how are you looking to navigate through these?
See, I think in this, of course, I think, eventually I think organizations like us are very people-driven organization. It all comes to talent, being able to nurture the right kind of talent within the organization and building trust with the partners that we work with. So I think talent and trust are the two pillars of NGO, and I think working on that is extremely important for any organization. And hopefully, I think funds etc. will become available to be able to do that.
So food, land and water often get less attention in climate debates. What role do agriculture and food systems play in India's climate response?
I mean, it's a big, big part of the emissions actually come from the agriculture sector, so it's critical. And of course, food security is an important topic. Land degradation is a huge issue. We also have to create, large carbon sinks. So I think the whole, when we are a water scarce country, so I think all of these issues are mainstream in our development agenda. If you look at Government of India, a lot of the schemes, Manrega, SRLM, watershed management, these are all focused on these. So I think the adaptation fund conversation has to advance in the global debate, but I think as a country, anyway, we have large amounts of public capital or public finance that is going to this agenda. We have to make sure that it is most effectively utilized, that we are also able to achieve both development and climate benefits and nature benefits at the same time.
Sir, what are your expectations from COP30?
No expectations for now. I think Brazil is really trying hard to make sure that certain so there will be a big focus on cities, there will be a big focus on forests because the Amazon, and hopefully we will see some progress on these agendas. And of course, I think the finance conversation will be again on top, but and the fact that the money is required, like I mentioned, to be able to actually meet the Paris ambition. And I think how much progress it, and really wish luck to the process to get some really useful outcomes out of that.
From last year's Connect Karo to this year's, what kind of changes have you been able to see on the ground and what next?
No, we've had some small successes, of course. I was just talking in the morning about this urban forest. Like we've managed to do some very interesting greening projects in Mumbai. Several cities now have climate action plans. We are starting to see really good, updates to the Surya Ghar and Kusum policies, for example, based on all of the feedback that the community has given. There is really a much bigger attention now to the storage issue on energy transition, and we are starting. So there is, I think, significant progress that is being made, and I think, but it's still small to what is needed, and hopefully we are going to see much more in the years to come.
Thank you, sir, for speaking to PTI. It was great having you with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming to Connect Karo, and it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.